Today we will speak about one very common and ordinary thing, which has supreme benefit for realizing Nibbana. In Pāli this is called Viveka, and in English we call it solitude. The meaning of Viveka, or solitude, puts more emphasis on the quality of loneliness or aloneness rather than singleness. Because even if one is just single, we don't know if this will be calm and peaceful. So we emphasize the quality of aloneness. The meaning of solitude can be used both in ordinary worldly matters as well as for the highest spiritual purpose. There is a verse that goes something like, "Solitude is the resting place for the suffering soul." And the meaning of this can be applied both on the ordinary level of home and family and work, as well as on the highest spiritual level. The roots of solitude are very deep. They go so deep as to be apparent in animals. Each animal has times when it needs to be alone. We can see this in all the animals we have around here in the temple. And then wild animals in the forest have an even greater need for solitude, to be alone. This is a principle that is very basic. It's an instinctual need of living things. Even ordinary people need this solitude. There are times when we want to be just left alone. Even the people we love, we don't want them to come and get involved with us. We just want to be left on our own. Because we feel even on the instinctual level that unless we have some solitude, we'll miss out on some very important things. That if we are always caught up and involved with other people, then it will be too troubling, disturbing, too busy for us. So if we look at solitude in these various ways, we'll see that it's one thing that we can't do without. So we should appreciate its importance and value. In the Pāli language, this word is Viveka, which comes from the part veka, which means one or single, and vi, which means utmost or highest. So Viveka means utmost singleness, utmost oneness, utmost solitude. Actually, the word solitude doesn't quite capture the entire meaning, but utmost or supreme singleness is what we mean by Viveka. Viveka can be understood on three primary levels. The first is the physical or material level regarding our bodies. The second is the mental level, which is mental solitude. And then the third is spiritual or spiritual solitude. We have these three levels for understanding the meaning of Viveka. The difference between the three is that when there is nothing disturbing us physically, when there is nothing disturbing the body, this we call physical viveka, physical solitude. When none of the hindrances or obstructions of the mind are bothering us or bothering the mind, we call that mental solitude. And when none of the objects of attachment are disturbing our mindfulness and wisdom, then this is what we call spiritual solitude. When we live in a simple way, then we will have a great deal of physical solitude. In the Pāli language, this is called dukkha, which are certain fundamental practices for living in a very simple, uncomplicated way. When we follow dukkha practices and keep sila, moral teachings, in a careful, relaxed way, then we have a very high level of physical aloneness, where we are physically undisturbed because life is uncomplicated. We don't have to worry about things. If we live plainly, then it is very easy to find physical solitude. But if we live luxuriously, it is very, very difficult to find physical solitude. And for mental solitude, what is called citta viveka. When these various kinds of disturbing moods and thoughts no longer hassle us, then we have mental solitude. There are the 5 hindrances. These are the things that get in the mind's way, that obstruct or prevent the mind from being in its natural, pure and happy state. These are sensuous desire or sensuality, ill will or aversion, dullness or a lazy sloppiness of mind, agitation or a scatteredness of mind, and then doubt. When all 5 of these have been abandoned, or when they are unable to arise, or if just naturally they don't arise, then the mind is said to have solitude. Then there is mental solitude. We go on to recognize that all 5 of these are ordinary possessions in daily life. These are things that are coming up throughout our ordinary existence all the time. When life goes in a positive way, then we end up falling into sensuality, into sensual desire. If life goes in a negative way, then the result is aversion, ill will, anger, hatred, where we don't like things and we even want to get rid of them, destroy them, kill them. And when life is just kind of going on and it is not clearly positive or negative, then various forms of confusion and delusion arise. So we end up with dullness of mind, or an agitated mind, or doubt. These are happening all the time. Maybe not constantly, but over and over again in our ordinary lives. and they prevent us from having the peace and quiet of mental solitude. If, however, you are successful in developing samadhi, a collected, calm, clear mind, if you can develop this through the practice of mindfulness with breathing, which you are working on, then these 5 hindrances will be swept away and the mind will have its very special solitude. So through successful development of samadhi, one can be easily free of these 5 hindrances. This brings us to Upadhi Viveka, which is solitude on the spiritual level. Upadhi means burdens. So to be free of all burdens, when the mind is not burdened or worn down or made heavy by any of the objects of attachment. When the mind is clinging to something, when anything is grabbed onto, then it gets carried around by the mind, and this is a burden, an unnecessary heaviness and constrictedness. And there has been no spiritual solitude. But when one lets go of all these attachments, then it is like dropping all burdens, and the mind is free of these things and then has spiritual solitude. To hold on to things and carry them around is called Upadhana in the Pāli language. This means to carry heavy things, to carry burdens. Upadhana we often translate as attachment or clinging. There are 2 ways of carrying things. We should understand the difference. The first way is to hold on to things, to carry things stupidly. This is called Upadhana. It is to carry things in a way that makes them a burden, to make problems for us. However, it is possible to hold things, make use of them, or to carry them in a wise way. We can carry them intelligently, with mindfulness and understanding. And then they are not heavy. This is called samadhana, which has nothing heavy or burdensome about it. So we have these 2 ways of relating to things. The difference between the 2 is very important. There are 4 basic ways that we turn things into burdens in our ordinary lives. And just as we go about the ordinary business and all that of our lives, there are 4 basic ways that we are grabbing onto things and carrying them around with us. In fact, there are things that we pick up when we are young and carry them with us for the rest of our lives. And we bear these burdens for years, often without ever paying attention to the fact. The first kind of foolish attachment is to sensuality, especially to sensual pleasures. We're clinging to sensual pleasures. The second is to opinions, views, ideologies, and beliefs. Clinging to any kind of opinion, ideology or belief, even if it is Buddhism, becomes clinging to views, the second kind. The third is a superstitious kind of grabbing onto things, where we hang on to them superstitiously. And the fourth is to attach to things through the egoistic concept of I and mine. These are the four ways of attaching to things. And when we attach, the things become burdens. If we know these four and understand them thoroughly, this will be of tremendous benefit to each of us. Because if we know them, then it is not so difficult to drop them, to be free of them. When something is positive, it invites us to attach to it in a positive way. When something is negative, it invites us to attach to it in a negative way. Don't go thinking that negative things don't have any attachment. In fact, we're clinging very strongly to negative things. So if something is positive or negative, they both entice us to attach to them. And then we turn these things into burdens. Thus we say that the positive and the negative, clinging to either of them, causes life to bite its owner. If there is any clinging to positive or negative, then life bites its owner. Something positive will stir up a positive kind of ego. Something negative will stir up a negative kind of ego. Either way, life bites its owner, either in a positive way or a negative way. When something positive or negative enters the mind, then it leads to dukkha. Stress creates conflict, turmoil, torment in the mind. So both positive and negative cause life to bite its owner. If you're successful at practicing Vipassana, the insight aspect of meditation, then you will be able to go beyond this problem. If you can successfully develop samadhi, so that the mind is very firm, clear, awake and active, then one can practice successfully the insight aspects of mindfulness with breathing. If one is successful in Vipassana, the results will be that positive and negative can no longer deceive you. You'll no longer be tricked and made a fool out of positive and negative things. Ordinarily, we think that the positive and negative are opposites. But in this case we are speaking of today, there is no real difference. Both the positive and the negative stir up ego in the same way. They are equal in their ability to stir up attachments and dukkha. They are basically the same in this way. Ordinarily we may think of them as opposites, but in the way they affect the mind, they fundamentally operate in the exact same way. Both positive and negative stir up desire, attachment, and lead to dukkha. In our modern world, with all the so-called development, it's very easy to see how much humanity is clinging to the positive. Open any magazine or watch a TV program and you'll see nothing but a lot of clinging to the positive, to consumer goods, to all kinds of beautiful ideas. The so-called New Age movement is another development of the same kind. Or the tourist industry. All aspects of modern life are very clearly full of clinging to the positive. People are running around chasing after the positive all over the world, especially when there is enough money to create the illusion of getting these things. We can see that any place. This doesn't happen by itself. Wherever there is clinging to the positive, then there will be an equal amount of clinging to the negative. So you can see the businessmen, the politicians, the ordinary people who are all caught up in this attachment to positive, also have a lot of fear of not getting what they are clinging to, or of losing what they are clinging to. So a lot of fear, worry, and anger also comes. And so wherever there is clinging to the positive, there will also be clinging to the negative. To whatever degree humanity attaches to the positive, that's how fast we are going to destroy the world. The more we cling to the positive, the more we are also full of negative kinds of clinging. And together these are destroying the world faster and faster. Any kind of clinging, whether to the positive or the negative, brings suffering. And this is what destroys our world. All around us, the world is full of things with positive and negative qualities, which is the world that we live in. When our mind, through wisdom, is no longer caught up in these positive and negative things, then we say that the mind is above or beyond positive and negative. This is our way to survival, or to salvation. To be above and beyond this power of positive and negative. This is the meaning of being spiritually alone, where nothing positive or negative can disturb the mind. This is what is necessary for our survival. The positive leads to a positive sort of ego. The negative leads to a negative sort of ego. Either way, there is an ego. And when there is an ego, the mind gets bitten. When there is an ego, the mind is not free, is not void. And so it can find no real peace. You should remember this most important sentence, that wherever there is ego, then there is no solitude. If there is ego in the mind, even if we go and sit in a cave in the mountains or stay at the charnel grounds or deep in the forest, there will be no real solitude, no matter where we go. If there is ego in the mind, then there cannot be any lasting or real solitude. But if the mind is void of ego, even if we go and sit in the middle of the theatre or stand on a busy street corner, the mind will have solitude. To get rid of the ego that is in the mind, any ego that arises in the mind, to get rid of it is to experience solitude immediately. One doesn't have to go up in the mountains and live like a hermit, or hang around funeral grounds or anything like that. To find real solitude, what one has to do is to drop ego, to toss the ego out of the mind. And then wherever one is, whatever one is doing, there immediately is Viveka. If you are successful in practicing, in developing samadhi which leads to vipassana insight, through your practice of mindfulness, if you are successful in this, then the whole world will be a place of solitude and peace for you. In terms of insight, vipassana, once the mind is really stable and clear, and then we can see things as they genuinely are. Then we no longer see things through the illusion of positive and negative. When we see things directly, then we see them as they are. And then the mind gets out of this trap, this illusion of positive and negative. And when the mind can see things in this way, then the positive and negative have no power over this. This has a special name in the Pāli language. It is called atammayata, which means that nothing at all can do anything to the mind. When nothing can cook up the mind, when nothing can produce results in the mind, when nothing can make the mind be like this or like that, when things have no power over the mind, when the mind is in this state, which we can call unconcoctability, nothing can mess with it. Nothing can cook it up. This is the highest meaning of Viveka. When the mind has this atammayata, this unconcoctability, then there is perfect solitude. And solitude on this level is a synonym for nibbana. Now the Buddha talked about this atammayata, both directly and indirectly, in great detail. But although he spent a great deal of time looking into this matter, it hasn't come down to our ordinary vocabulary. When it comes to ordinary people, they never talk about it. They never give it any attention. So we need to bring this into our everyday vocabulary. We can talk about spiritual equilibrium, unconcoctability, unconditionality. But there are other words which convey the same relative meaning. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of the words like equilibrium or equanimity, but you've probably never heard them on the highest level. You've probably never discussed them on the truly spiritual level, which is the mind totally free of positive and negative. Lots of people talk about balance, but on a relatively low level. One needs to most of all be interested in spiritual equilibrium that is free from and beyond all positive and negative. In this way there is genuine solitude. There is true Viveka. It is only in this kind of solitude that there is the resting place for suffering souls. Whether Viveka or Nibbana, neither of them have anything to do with death. What they mean is that there is no dukkha, no suffering. Ultimately, the meaning of both Viveka and Nibbana is that the mind is totally free from all dukkha. So these words don't mean death. They mean a coolness, a peacefulness, when the mind isn't troubled or pained by anything. We call this quenching. When the mind is quenched, it is not dead. It is just quenched. All the fires are put out. If you practice mindfulness diligently and correctly, you'll be more and more successful. And this will lead to 4 things. You'll get 4 valuable things from this practice. The 4 are sati, mindfulness; panya, intuitive wisdom; sampajanya, which is wisdom in action, a specifically applied wisdom; samadhi, the collected mind, which is firm yet active; these are the natural results of a correct practice. And then these are of tremendous benefit in how we live our lives. In ordinary circumstances, it begins with sati. Mindfulness then recollects wisdom, brings wisdom to the situation. That general wisdom that we have developed then is applied to the specific situation, just the wisdom necessary for dealing with this situation. And that is called sampajanya, this special application of wisdom. And then to supply the necessary strength and power, there is samadhi. These 4 things work together in dealing with all the circumstances of our lives. These are developed through a good practice of mindfulness. And then once we have these four, they will enable us to live life with Viveka. We all have sati, mindfulness, to begin with. But it is just an ordinary level. There is not enough of it. It's too slow. So we need to develop it so that sati, mindfulness, is sufficient and of the highest speed. And then it will be able to serve us in all experiences of life. Further, through practicing mindfulness with breathing, one will come to a very deep understanding of paticca samuppada, dependent origination. The more deeply we practice mindfulness with breathing, the more apparent dependent origination will be for us. We'll see more and more clearly how dukkha arises and how dukkha is quenched. And this is the essence of wisdom. So understanding dependent origination, this is what wisdom is about. So that then, whatever the situation, mindfulness will recollect this wisdom. Mindfulness is like the vehicle of wisdom, and it brings wisdom. It transports wisdom to the situation in front of us, so that we will know how to deal with it in a way that no dukkha will arise. The next we will look at is sampajanya, wisdom in action. Wisdom is like medicine in the medicine chest. In a house, there is a place where one stores all kinds of medicines and things. But one needs to choose the appropriate medicine for our ailment. So wisdom is like all the medicine in the chest. Mindfulness chooses the right medicine and brings it to the situation. This specific cure for what ails us. This is called sampajanya. The specific wisdom which is needed to cope with the situation. It is not necessary to bring the whole chest of medicines. Just bring that aspect of wisdom, the application of which will solve the problem. So now mindfulness goes and gets wisdom, brings it, and this specific wisdom functions for dealing with the situation. The only question is whether there is enough power, whether the mind has enough strength to deal with the situation and be totally free. This is a question of whether there is enough samadhi. Samadhi is the mind's energy gathered together and focused, which leads to great stability as well as great strength. If we practice mindfulness with breathing, there will be enough samadhi, so that if mindfulness brings wisdom, and then there is specifically applied wisdom working, if there is not quite enough strength to do the job, more samadhi can kick in order to do the job totally, completely. So this will be developed through practicing anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. One should understand that samadhi is like weight. Wisdom is like sharpness. If you take some cutting tool like an axe or knife, you notice that not only it must be sharp, but it must have weight. If you take a razor blade, which is very sharp, and try to cut down a tree, it will take you a very long time because the razor blade has no weight. To cut something you need sharpness, but there has to be weight behind it. Wisdom is the sharpness, and samadhi provides the weight that provides the work. One should observe the interconnectedness of these four things. If there is no sati, then any wisdom we have is a waste. No matter how much we have studied or know, how much we have meditated, in real life, if there is no mindfulness, then all our understanding is useless. Or if there is no samadhi, we can be very wise. But if there is no samadhi, the mind isn't firm and clear. Then wisdom won't have the strength to deal with any problems. And wisdom itself cannot develop without mindfulness, without samadhi. So all of these are interconnected. To function, we need all four together. Just to have two or three isn't enough. We must develop all four of them and develop them in a way where they function as a team. When we strengthen mindfulness, wisdom in action, and samadhi, when these four are sufficiently strong and working as a unit, then these become our life mates, our partners in life, and enable us to be free of all dukkha. And so through them, through developing them, this leads to more and more viveka, until solitude becomes nibbana, the perfect freedom, peace, and coolness of mind. There won't be anything that can disturb you or harm you if you have these four bodyguards: mindfulness, wisdom, applied wisdom, and samadhi. With these four bodyguards, Viveka becomes perfect. Nothing is disturbing the mind. The mind is totally at peace. The positive can't bite you. The negative can't bite you. Nothing will be biting. You can see for yourself that Viveka also means freedom. It means independence. Through Viveka, the mind is emancipated from all the things that enslave it, all the things that bind it, all the things that harm it. So in Viveka, there is also perfect freedom. This is to be a perfected human being, or an arahant, the highest development of human life. So in Viveka, in solitude, there is freedom.